And let me know if the music gets too loud and distracting, because I'm trying a little bit different music today, and sometimes the horror music gets a little bit overpowering. So we'll see how it goes, though. But okay, so we are working on Linux Labs. I'm going to click on the link here and pop the labs down for people that want to do them with me, both on the Twitch side and the YouTube side. You guys are welcome to hang out and ask questions, or do any of those kind of things like we would normally do while we're doing labs. So the lab today is about gathering information like you were a new sysadmin. So it reads like this: you're a new systems administrator at a company. You've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has little to no documentation on it. You find yourself at a command prompt and need to find out what type of systems you're working on. So we need to know the release and the version of this system. So what is the release of this, and what does that mean? So every system has a version and who released it and all kinds of other types of pieces of information. And most of the time you'll get good information around that with the command cat etc splat release. In most modern Linux systems, you're going to see that, and it's going to kind of key you in on what's going on. Now, we're assuming that you're coming in as somebody that maybe, the company you're working with has maybe little or no, um, they may have little or no documentation on this. So maybe you're coming in as a new admin and you're going to have to fix it. Maybe I got to turn the music down just a little bit. Go right there. Sounds a little loud. Okay. So we come down here and we look and we see that we're on Ubuntu 2404.1 LTS, which will help to inform us how we might put in a support ticket if there was something that we couldn't fix, or if there was some engineering problem that none of our team could get around to. These are the types of things that we might go look at. Okay. Steep One said audio is very low. How about I turn down my desktop audio? Does that make my normal audio sound a little higher for you guys? Because I am not quite yelling in my microphone, but I'm doing some business on it. You guys hear me a little better there? All right. Well, we'll go with what we got. Hopefully, I can amp it up a little bit on the microphone if we really need to. I'll turn it up. How about I turn it up like that? Is that a little louder? It's definitely going to be louder, but we'll see. Okay, so you've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers, little or no documentation, right? So we're finding out some stuff about the system. But one thing I like to show people, especially as you dig in, like, where is this information coming from? You do the same command, but now you put an ls-l, and that'll show you where this actually... See, all this did was just cat against anything that this glob showed. So this glob could have went anywhere, right? That's a shift 8 or a glob. And it's just going to expand out to anything that fits the search of anything release, right? So what it found, ls-l will show us, it found an etc lsb release, and then it found an etc os release, and etc os release doesn't really exist. It's actually a link over to up one directory, so an etc user lib os release. So let's see if we could prove that to ourselves real quick. Could I do a cat on etc, so user in this case lib os release, and would that give me the same information that one would have? Yeah, it gave me the same information out of there. So this is one way to get information. If you were putting in a trouble ticket or something, or you just wanted to maybe throw it in your notes. Again, this is a company that has very little documentation, so you would want to start figuring out and feeding out this information to maybe your configuration management database, which is a CMDB. Maybe you want to feed it out to your own notes or a drawing. You've maybe got a drawing going on, and you're going to start putting information in about the different servers that you know about. Right? And you may be maintaining 20 servers. You may be maintaining 20,000 servers. So it's not going to fundamentally change the base command that you might use to get this. Yeah, we'd probably search down to just something like either probably version ID or something like that, and then, or maybe version like this, so that we got this, and then maybe we would just query it across all of them with something like Ansible or something that we could report it all out with. But the point is, we can see all this information that's maybe not well documented by the system, right? So then, oh, by the way, down here, there's always the solution. So the solution will tell you the other things. So the kernel version on this server is uname-r. You can also use uname by itself, and that'll tell you you're in Linux. You can use a uname-a to see all the information, but that's a bit much for most of us. That's a bit much more than we might have needed for this. We really just wanted to know that we were on the 6.8 kernel, which is a very, very new kernel, right? I think this was released this year or maybe late last year, the 6 kernel. That's a major version release, too, to go to 6. So 6.8, and then we come down here a little bit and we see other very important things like the architecture, which we could also get with uname-m. So if we were unsure if our servers were x86-64 or if they were Arch, if they were ARM processors. ARM is the other type of processor you might see here, and that might be like ARM64 or something like that. So that would be there, right? So anyways, these are the things that we might want to check and know for either serving up to a vendor or, again, for our own documentation to see like what a system might be doing. Another one that I love to know is how long has the system been up. So I'll use uptime. Uptime will tell me good information. It'll tell me the time of the system. It's been up 46 minutes. It's got no users on it, right? It's got no users that are using any of the terminals, right? And then the load average of this system is basically nothing. If we do an nproc, we see that we got one CPU. There's no wait time in the 1, the 5, or the 15-minute window to get to that processor. There's no wait time at all. So that's kind of good to know, right? As far as, especially if an event's occurring on your server and you want to see, is the load still happening in the 1-minute time, or is it gone, but it was happening for a while and it's still in the sliding 15-minute window, right? This is something that I use a lot for web servers, because web servers will get transient traffic coming in, and you just never know, what happened or what was going on. And before you even dig down into the logs, is the event still occurring, or is it something that happened in the past? You can tell that very quickly with this 1, 5, and 15-minute timer right here, right? That's a useful thing to understand. And then we might want to know how the system was booted, so we might do cat proc command line. And here is the boot image that was given. So these are all the kernel arguments, or the command line arguments as the kernel came up. You can also do a head. I do a D message and then pipe it through head. And in the first few seconds of this, first few lines, we see that same command line right there. So you can get it through proc command line to see how the system was booted, or you might see it down here through this. So real quick, if we were like in my home lab here, I think I got to reconnect to this. Restart the session up. Hop in the home lab here. All right, so hop in the home lab here. And if I were to go to one of these boxes, let's get out of there, and let's say I'm going to send an Ansible command to all my CentOS 7 boxes in my home lab, and we just look at them real quick and say, do we think that they were built the same way, or do we think that they're different boxes, like different general builds and updates of the boxes? And right there by that kernel and the way that that system looks right there, even though they're two different machines, they've got the same exact kernel calls. They've got the exact same command line arguments and way that they were carved. I might surmise in my home lab that they were built from the same base disk image, and that they've been updated similar since they've been updated. Because look at that. I mean, everything's the same. You would think maybe something would be different if they'd been built differently, right? And that tends to be something that's true too. So if I go look at like 10 of my servers that I know were built the same way, and one of them is aberrant, I think, well, was it configured wrong? Is it booted? Did it boot off an old image? Is it looking at the right? There's all kinds of things that it makes me go prompt to check. But this is one of those things that we'll use to make sure that all the systems and all the things that we're touching are the same, right? So catproc command line, huge. And then I just used a tool called Ansible against all my CentOS 7 boxes to hit that, right? And I could change that. I could use Ansible against the problem with Ansible, and if I did like all, is it's going to hit all of the servers in my environment. It might even break on some because I'm not using the right key. Yeah, there it goes. It'll break on some with the key. But we could maybe surmise. Yeah. We might surmise that some of them are built differently. Like, look at all these Loki. Those ones were all built similar. But this Nagios one over on 4.7 was definitely built different than this host box. Look, they got different kernel versions, different major kernel versions. They have differences in, well, they were built the same way there, built that, but for sure they're different versions of the kernel. And then they're definitely carved up differently. Like this Nagios box is using HD0 and MS-DOS 1, so it's got some kind of weird booting going on. I'm not even used to that type of label. That's an old way of labeling a boot image right there. Like super old, like 20 years ago old. I don't know if I grabbed that. Like I'm wondering where I got this from actually. That is old. But then with the 4 kernel, that's from, yeah, that can be about 15 years old or so. You can go look up how long the 4 kernel's been around, but it's been around a while. Maybe not 15, but for sure over 10. So anyways, the point is that we could look at these and surmise that things are different. So anyway, so we come over here, and we're going to dig a little deeper into our systems now. By the way, I dropped this course in the chat, so if anybody wants to do the lab I'm doing, it's in the chat. It's one of my Killer Coda labs, but I guess if you need it, just let me know. And it says, now we want to dig into each command. We're going to look at some commands, and we're going to see what we think are happening with these commands. Basically, we're going to look at this system and figure out what the system's doing. So I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to use a tool called VMstat. Where's Ranger at? I'm surprised Ranger's not on his bed right now. VMstat's giving us a bunch of information about what's going on in the system memory. It's actually, funny enough, even though it's called VMstat, over here on the left, it's showing us a little bit. This is runnable and blocking against the processor. So it showed us for every 1 second, right here, for 5 iterations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds from when this was kicked off. It showed us all the runnable and all of the blocking type processes in the system at that exact moment. So let's just leave this running for a little bit while we talk. We can actually sit here and watch. And then down here we can see if anything's swapping. We don't want things to swap. If anything's held in swap, we would see it here, but there's none. Here's the free, the buff, and the cache of the memory. So the free memory is really what we care about most of the time. The buffers and the cache are things that are being held up, but they're not necessarily being used actively at the time. Swap in and swap out is how much are we actively swapping, not what's sitting out in swap memory. So that's a good thing to understand. Watch this. This command's going to do something cool right here. Right when it gets to the end, it's going to redo its header at the bottom. I like that it does that. I think that's a nice little touch built into this command. We have IO, block in, block out. Sorry, no, those are not block in, block out. Those are bytes in and bytes out of IO. And then we've got some system commands and CPU information over here, right? And I actually have a slide that shows you guys what's going on in VMstat. But if you really wanted to dig in on it, you could always hit Control-C and type man VMstat, and you can go look at what any of those are. If you were like, well, what are all those things? These are all the pieces of information right here that are being shown in every 1 second slice. At the 1 second check, when it does the check, this is what's happening in that system. This is super useful for looking at load on a system. Like, let's say you have an application that's running on a system, but when the system first came up, um, it hasn't started. You know, it's the middle of the night. You got called out, and now you're looking at this system, and your app team's like, hey, we've been starting this service, and it won't start. We're looking at the logs, and we're not seeing things except out of memory. Can you do something to help us? Yeah, you could watch the system with that. You could use like VMstat1, watch the system and say, and while you're on the call in an active out of band fashion, talk to them and say, hey, go ahead and turn that on for me so I can see what happens to the system. And you can sometimes pinpoint. Maybe it doesn't work that time and the system still crashes, and then you go, okay, well, I didn't capture anything there with VMstat, so maybe it's not something right here. Can we look at, you know, maybe I'm going to put an strace on it as it starts, and we're going to see exactly what's happening with it, right? We might use an ltrace to look at the libraries that it's calling. We have a fair amount of tools. I mean, best debugging tools typically are going to be on the app team side of things, but the point is we can see a lot of kind of what's going on there. I'm going to hit Q to get out of there, and then I'm going to say, what are we seeing here? We just looked at all the things, and is the system under high memory usage or not? And I would say the answer is it is not. It is absolutely not under high memory usage right now. And now we're going to check the overall CPU usage of the system every second for 5 seconds. So we're going to use MPStat for that. So MPStat will tell us how used our CPU is every 1 second. And now I'm going to run that same command, but I'm going to just do it every 1 second forever while we talk here. And I'm just going to ask you to look at that system real quick and tell me if you think that system's under high load. Like if somebody told you, hey, this system is having some kind of like problem, we don't know what it is, you might go look at it and go, well, it doesn't look like it's a high load system problem, right? It could be a configuration problem, it could be all kinds of other problems, but this system is chilling. This is like finding the system sitting out in a hammock, and you're like, you working on anything, buddy? And it's like, maybe later, right? Like this server's mostly, in fact, the only thing that's red is how hard it's idling. So I don't know, I think that's funny, but there's all kinds of things that we can do to test this, and I even have some labs later on that we spin some stuff up, and then we can watch kind of what's happening with the system, right? So is this system under high memory load? No. Is that under high CPU load? Also no. But maybe we want to look at what this server's doing then, right? So one of the things I like to show you guys is if you do ps-ef, right? It'll show you everything that's going on in the system. Just everything. All kinds of stuff. Here's the process ID and the parent process ID for any ID, right? And we scroll down and we see that many of the things that are started with the parent process ID of 1. So this user bin container D, whatever this is, has a parent process of 1. And maybe we can go find out what the parent process of 1 is to figure out what that is, figure out how that's working. And Silas Roger, thanks for the follow a few minutes ago. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We are just working through basics of Linux right now. Every now and then I just kind of back up and do the simplest thing, right? We start over, we just start doing Linux, and I try to get you guys, like the stated goal of our group is, it's right across the bottom there, trying to get you guys that are hobbyists into being professionals. We do have a Discord. I'm constantly telling you guys about the Discord and that you guys can go hang out and talk shop with other people that are doing similar stuff or want to do similar stuff as you, right? I want you guys to be able to get in here and I don't want anybody to be lost, right? I want people to be able to find the things that are interesting to them in this space and then be able to dig into those. To that end, you might see over here spinning, we have 2 free books. They're right here, the Linux admin course and the Prolog security course. And let me know if you guys need those links. If you probably can't just catch them off of here, but let me know if you guys need those links because I'll gladly drop them. But those are 2 free books that the guys put together on the free courses that we did. So if you guys want to do Linux administration or Linux security engineering, those are the books that we currently have that are free for you guys to use. Okay, you can actually go to those and you can hit the little print button up in the top right, and it will print to a PDF for you on your Chrome or whatever browser you have. So real quick though, we look at this and we see this system with all of its stuff going on, right? And I think you guys should be able to see that okay. But here's we might want to then say, well, okay, let's talk about these UIDs. Who is the user that kicked off any of these processes? And you might very quickly go, well, Scott, it looks like a whole bunch of root, and that's a whole bunch of root user, but maybe I want to count it. Easy money, you guys need the links? Okay, one second, hold on. Here are the links for, this is the Linux admin course. Here's the Linux admin course link. I'm glad you guys said that and stopped me because I was just going to keep talking forever. And then here's the professional, this is the security engineering course, which I think the guys are still working on the books just a little bit, but they're doing really good work over there. So those are the books. You guys are welcome to use those as much as you need. As much or as little as you need. You can print them out so you have an offline copy. They also, well, you can print them to a PDF, and then they also link back to like all of the, there's, the guys did really good work on them. There's, like if you were to go to any one week and look at the worksheet, it also links back to the recording I did for that week, right? So here's the Unit 1 recording and all that kind of stuff. So everything that you would need to do the course is there, right? So yeah, you guys are absolutely like, you know, the guys that put that together, they get all the recognition at the end of the book, but you know, they did it all like volunteer time, and also to be able to show a cool project that they had done for a potential employer, right? Because like a lot of the guys that work in the group are trying to get into this space, and the goal is to get hands-on and understand this stuff. But back to this user ID over here on the left. So the user ID is a mapping. We see it as this, but the system really doesn't see it like this. The system is just showing us that's a mapping that we see. So I know this is root and systemd and message plus and polkitd and all these kind of things. The system is actually mapping from a real number. There's a number involved. And the number is mapped out of etcpasswd. etcpasswd, that's etc/PASSWD. And I guess technically there's a / and then an etc, and then a / and a passwd. But anyways, this, and it keeps saying password, but it's passwd. Anyways, let's say though that we wanted to see these carved up in such a way that we could just enumerate them all. Like, what if I told you right there to count those all up? You'd have been like, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. I'm not going to count them. We'd be here for at least a minute. If you were really fast, maybe a minute, and some of you would mess it up. You wouldn't get 111. You'd get some other number, and that would be wrong, right? So where I'm going with that is not to shame anybody. I'm just telling you, we can put our tools together in such a way that it does good work for us. So if we were to take this apart, ps-ef dumped everything to the screen, and then we're going to use a command like awk. Awk is going to print $1. Well, what is $1? Well, these are columns here, and they are space delimited columns. And you say, what do you mean by space delimited? I mean that any number of spaces delimits a field, meaning this is field 1 right here, this is field 2, this is field 3, this is field 4, this is field 5, this is 6, this is 7, and then this is 8 for most of them, but some of them have spaces, which would be 9, 10, 11, and 12, and it would start to get really silly, right? So, but just at the left side, 1 is where we start counting in this case. So if I just did this, it would just print the first field. You guys see that? Or the first column, rather. And it is, that's the delimiters of spaces, so we see that. So then we can come here and we could sort them, and it will put them in alphabetical order, which is nice. And then we could use the command unique. And unique is cool because it'll basically pancake them all down together, but unique-c will pancake them all down and count them for us, which is one of the most useful commands I found in my career. Like of all the little things that I do, that's one that's the best. Now, I didn't really talk too much about what's happening, but ps-ef obviously came to the screen, right? We saw that come to the screen. That is called standard output. So standard output is registered to the screen so we can read it. And then what we did with this pipe character was we said, whoa, 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 catch what's coming out of there. And before it goes to standard output, send it into the standard input of this command. So this thing that was originally right here, like this, instead of coming to the screen, it got caught by awk, and awk did this to it. And then it got caught by sort, and sort did this to it. And then it got caught by unique, and unique did this to it. And then we did it again, and it got caught by unique with the -C, and unique -C counted them all for us. So the standard output from any command that's coming out to the screen can be redirected with a pipe symbol. That's a shift in the character above your enter key. It can be redirected to the standard input of the next command, and then the command will act on it as though it were doing something against the list or anything else that you could have fed it as an input. Does that kind of make sense? I hope that makes sense to people. Hey, Colchis, how's it going? So we're just going through some of the basics today, Colchis, and we're just filtering down and making sure that people understand what's going on as we interact with our system, right? So I say, what user is using the most processes? Well, in this system, it's definitely root. Root's got 109 right here. Root's kind of being greedy on the system. But also, if we think about it, is there really anything going on this system? I would argue no. There's not really much of any work going on in this operating system. I don't see it being operated as a the primary three types of servers you're going to deal with. Now, you may deal with other servers, guys, but the primary, let's call them archetypes, are going to be like a web server, an application server, and a database server or a storage server. Those are going to be your primary types of servers. Now, what do I mean by archetype? Because some of you guys are like, what the hell's an archetype? Okay, an archetype is, I'm going to make some people mad. Anybody here ever seen the show The Last of Us? Good, I have not seen it. Now, the archetype of that show is a zombie show. That is the type of show it is. It is a zombie horror film or zombie horror show. Now, hold on. The pedantry of the thing is, well, they're not actually zombies. There's a fungus involved, and the fungus controls their head and turns them into zombies. I know, we understand the archetype. You get what I'm saying? So, like, saying something's a web server, it could be a lot of things, guys. It could be API focused. It could be all these other things. An app server could be a Java app server or a custom backend Flask server that's taking, calls off of a front-end load balancer. There's all kinds of things that can be happening. I'm just talking about the archetype of a server, right? Like the primary, and I'm saying, yeah, archetype of a server. Okay. Now let's go look at some other ones. Let's look at PIDstat. PIDstat's a good one. I like the way that this one kind of looks. And this is going to tell us what processes are using the processor at the exact second of the call. So I'm going to make that a little bigger. Maybe this will be a little easier to read. And let's just watch that one for a while. And then, remember how I said earlier, and we did an uptime, and we saw that the server was basically operating at a 0 wait for the processor? Basically, anything that wanted the processor got access to it in real time. So what you're seeing here, sometimes you see, one, or sometimes you see, multiple. Sometimes in some cases you see nothing. In those 2 seconds where there was nothing sampled, nothing was working against the processor at that time that showed any kind of usage that would have come back to this. I'm surprised that happened because the process itself is also operating on the server, so the process could have found itself. Look, there was 3 seconds right there where literally nothing was happening at the exact moment when the sample occurred, by the way. So something could have happened within that second and been missed, right? Does that kind of make sense? And then you look at this and you go, well, Scott, that seems kind of interesting, but couldn't I really go deeper on this? And I say, yeah, guys, we are like on the outside. Have you guys ever seen like a gilded statue or something? Gilded means you like put some little bit of like gold over the top of it, and then you can go up and like scratch the gold off it or something. We are like barely scratching the surface of the things that we could do. But at a high level, in the things that are going to redirect us to kind of knowing, or when we're first learning a system, we can look at this to go, this system's not doing much. But if we go look at like a server like maybe my servers, right? And this is my home jump box that people jump into. Let's see, but somebody's in on MC Hammer, so people are doing stuff through this server right now. If I were to do a PIDstat on this server, I would imagine there's a significantly higher amount of things kind of happening on here, right? Now, you might notice I don't get all those cool colors here, right? You can't always rely on those colors in the terminal. Look, some of these are having multiple things. Oh, I got Ansible playbooks running. Apparently, I got all kinds of stuff. Oh, I have an Ansible playbook that runs every minute out of here. That's what it is. So there's my Ansible playbook running and doing a bunch of checks against a bunch of systems and all that kind of stuff. So there we go. All right. Anyways, so all that to say, why do these boxes have, why do these have different length output? What process were using the most CPU and which showed up the most often? Well, we might just watch this for a while, right? And see kind of what's going on. We might also do this and then have them start that application we were talking about earlier to see what's actually happening in the system, to see where the high load points are as the system is operating in whatever way it's operating, right? We can do a very similar thing to this. By the way, it averaged it all up at the end, and I can see how much CPU, how much CPU, and these are user and system space, which are the most important calls against the CPU. And here's the process ID that was using those during that time that we were just watching up there. PID stat's a pretty good one. Yeah. Wait, are there still ads? I think the ads should be gone. Yeah, I think that's good. So we're going to do IOStat. And IOStat will give us a lot of information. Look at this. This one's kind of getting messy, so I'm going to move this over so we can see it a little better. And we might have to then move this down as well so that we can see the whole thing correctly. Yeah, we might be able to get this. Let's try it once more. IOStat. Yeah. IOStat's doing okay. But what's IOStat showing us? Now this one gets a little trickier. In that IOStat by default wants to show us two things. It's either showing us processors, and that's with a -C, or it's showing us block devices, which is a -D. So IOStat -D, and then let's say 1, would show us the disk block devices, which in this case is just VDA1. And an IOStat-C will show us something completely different, which is the CPU time. And that's very similar to what we saw with some of our other commands. But when we use IOStat with the -XZ flags, what it's going to do is it's going to show us the device and the CPU, but it's only going to show us the device if something was going against the device. So look, here at the beginning, obviously when we first started it, it was both using some CPU and the device for a second just to read what was going on. But then now here and here and here and here and here and here, the rest of the time we were doing this, there was no output of any reads or writes going to that block device VDA1 or VDA in this case. So what that means is we could very much be looking at a system that's just not writing to the block devices at all. Or we may go and find out where those block devices are mounted. So VDA1 is mounted to root, and then we could write to root, and we could just write a bunch of small files while we were doing this, and we could just see how the block device handles it, right? So we can do all that kind of stuff. Julius Caesar said, how do you know if a process is behaving unusually? Well, so processes by themselves, so typically you're going to have some type of monitors on the system. So the question was, how do you know if a process is behaving unusually? Okay, so if it's just a system process, right, you typically have some kind of monitors on a system, and the monitors are telling you if there's high load or CPU or disk usage or whatever, and those tend to look something like this in a company. Like something like this would show, the what's going on inside of a set of servers. Like in my case, my home lab kind of lets me know that the CPU is going high and the memory is going high every day, and that's because of some stuff that we have running. And then the number of users that are in the system, I can see those over here, and I can see how that's connected, how long the servers have been up, like stuff like that. But then the other part of that question of like, how do you know if a process is behaving unusually, is kind of the output, right? So let's say you're running a web service, right? And then there's a back-end application that's written in Java. So people are coming in on a web page that's mostly being served by static, static maybe load balancers or static Nginx or something like that, right? Yeah. I mean, the font is small, so I could fit it. I could put the font back up, right? But the font was just because this was gonna be messy. That's why I moved the font down. Look, there's Ranger. What's Ranger doing? I think Ranger's looking out the window. Oh my god, I think he's licking the blinds. My dog, man, he's so old. Enjoying World said, hey, is there any job section in the course? Not directly getting a job, but there is on the job stuff every week. So if you're talking about like this Linux sysadmin one, this one is, everything in this is about getting the job. It's about how you interact with the business the entire time. So that's a good question. So then we come over here. Now we're going to dig a little deeper into the system. But yeah, so the idea of this is we're looking at very high level stuff. But yeah, if a system stops behaving correctly, that tends to be one of those indicators, of compromise or indicators of some kind of error. And the time it takes us to detect a problem in our system is often called the mean time. Well, so your time to detect on any one issue is the time it took to detect it. So if it took you 15 minutes to detect something, or if it took you getting a call from, one of your customers or one of your dev teams, that's the time it took you to detect something. But over time, teams that do operations, we have this thing called a mean time to detect. And that's what we want to move down as low as possible. We want to detect things, and then our mean time to resolve is the aggregate time from the time that the service started having a problem through completion. So it's mean time to detect, and then mean time to resolve is, then the rest of the time that it took you to actually fix it. One of the things I often ask in that course, and when we're talking about this, is what if you called me up, right? What if somebody finally called me and got Scott to roll out of bed, and then it took me 15 minutes to fix something. 15 minutes is wonderful, isn't it? But what if the mean time to detect the problem was it had been having a problem since last Friday? Well, it's Wednesday right now, guys. That's 5 days. 5 days plus 15 minutes does not sound good to an engineering manager. And that does not sound good to an engineering director. And that does not, well, because, and here's the thing, you might say, well, Scott might just be a team player and say he was working on it for 5 days. The hell I am. I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with my job and I couldn't fix it in 15 minutes. I'm going to write up what happened and go back to sleep, right? Especially if you call me out. I might be a little bit of a team player, but my point is, like, you'd be throwing me under the bus at that point, right? So, yeah, no, enjoying the world. There's not like necessarily a job section, but we do have things like if you go on the Discord, we do have quite a bit of like meeting notes on it. So watch, I'm going to pop the Discord up over here for people. Discord's free, guys. You can ask people in there. I've never, charged you guys nothing in the Discord. Yeah, we have stuff in the Discord, especially in like meeting notes, where we've went through. If you go back a little ways, you don't have to go back very far. We don't talk in here much. You go back not too far, and there's there were some notes that I put in there for other stuff, right? And you guys can use all that. But then there's like a job posting and interviews. This was when we actually do the interview job, when we actually do like the interviews. And I have you guys do all the Linux. This is the Do All the Linux Services company. Do all the Linux services. That's funny because Anyway, so that's really funny. Do all the Linux services. That's funny. But this was like a fake job posting that I made. But we have real job postings that we post up here. And here's questions that I ask in interviews and stuff like that. So there are ways to, I think, get better. Like I talk often. So the question from Enjoying the World was, is there any job section? I talk often about what I think you guys should be doing to get yourselves more ready. John Jones said, thank God it's Friday. Yeah, it's actually Friday for my wife because she's off tomorrow and then also Saturday. I'm only off, or Friday. I'm only off Friday. I don't know if any of you guys, sounds like Jones is off tomorrow and Friday. So that's nice. That's nice. You got that going for you. All right, anyway, so let's check the solution on this one. So we want to dig a little deeper into the networking of this system and see how the networking is working. So there's a really awesome tool that may or may not be there called SAR, and SAR will give us some visibility into what's happening at the different layers of the networking, traffic that's coming in and traffic that's coming out. Paul Hartle only off Friday. Yeah, Paul, I'm only off Friday too. Yeah, we work for government systems, right? So Paul works for a different government system than me, but he does work for the government as well. So we both are off Friday. And then Paul, I don't know if you know, I'm going down to Mexico for like a week and some change, almost a week and a half. I'll be down in Mexico, down in Cancun area, hanging out. Some of you guys know I go down there typically once a year for wrestling, and it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but nobody's keeping track of that. Nobody cares. If I say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they'll just throw their hands around like it's karate. So I just call it wrestling because it's way easier for everybody else. But now we come down here and SAR-N dev, and this will show us what's going on with the devices. So I'm going to move this over so you guys can see it pretty well. And this is pretty nice, right? I can let this kind of just spin while we talk by taking off the final designator of how many and just say every 1 second show me this. And this is giving us the RX, which is the receive, and the TX, which is the transmit of both packets. Packets are the first two. And then the transmit over here and receive over here of kilobytes per second. And then our received, I'm not sure what CMPs are. We might have to look those up. I'm not sure what they are in this context. And transmitted CMPs. And then receive MCSTs. And the total interface utilized. This one is really important. Because if you were to tell me, hey, Scott, I suspect that we have something wrong with the servers, and I think that the problem is they're overutilizing their interfaces. Well, we can go validate that thought right here. We don't have to guess. We don't have to assume. We can see how utilized the interfaces are right here. We can see that, right? If we wanted to look up, right, we could man SAR, right, and look for CMP. And this is the number of compressed packets received per second, and then the number of compressed packets transmitted per second, and then the number of multicast packets received per second. So maybe we're on a device that's functioning as a router, right? Linux systems will sometimes act as routers in networks for various stub network reasons, and there's a bunch of reasons. I have, like, if you guys have never seen my home lab, right? Let me pull up the home lab real quick. I know I got to reconnect, but in my home lab, I have a Linux box that acts as a router, right? Some of you guys have seen this before. The reason I do this is because then that device functions, he's C router right here, he functions to move packets between two VLANs. Now, if any of you guys are familiar with VLANs, once you have VLANs implemented in any network, now to communicate intra VLAN, right? We have to, inter VLAN. So to communicate between VLANs, we need to go up to layer 3. So now we have to have a router involved. Hey, the premium, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. Thank you for the follow. Z-Love and Colchis, yep, we're hanging out. I'm talking Linux and just kind of showing you guys around the basics, right? We are doing a lab. The lab is free. All the stuff we do, for the most part, is free. I'm going to drop this right here. And then I'm going to drop this over here. So that's a lab we're doing right now. You just switched for Linux for the first time, and I got Parrot OS because I'm going into cybersecurity. Any tips or advice for a newcomer like me? My main advice would be touch Linux every day, right? If you told me you wanted to be a writer, I'd tell you to write every day. If you told me you wanted to be a football player, I would tell you to practice and lift and work out and stretch and all that stuff every day, right? So I'm going to tell you the same thing about Linux. I often tell people as you get, so you're already aligned to what you want to do. You're using Parrot OS, so that is aligned to your cybersecurity goal. So I would tell you to keep doing that. Some of you guys have been around and know that, like, when we do normal stuff, I almost always have you guys using either Ubuntu or RHEL. or a RHEL derivative, because those are the ones that are used out in the industry, right? Ubuntu a little smaller, but it is acceptable for government projects, right? U.S. government allowed Ubuntu in like 2020. So they have gotten certified, and they do show up in some of the clusters that I work on, right? It's still heavily a Red Hat world out there, but that being said, like we mostly, Rocky Linux will get us close on that. But if you're in cybersecurity and you know the OS you're going to use, my advice would be to touch it every day. The next thing I would tell you is, and this is my 20-something year, I think about 22 years in the industry and then 17 years teaching this at the college level, is that everybody thinks they want to do cybersecurity, but very rarely do people want to learn the basics. And what I would tell you that the people I know that are really good at cybersecurity are all very good at the basics. The basics of what? The basics of the networking that they're touching, because everything's crossing the network. The basics of the operating system that they're touching. Like they understand the fundamentals of how data are moving around and interacting with the different things. So that would be my advice, is just touch systems every day and then understand the fundamental components of these things, right? If you're working heavily in Linux, learn your Linux systems. If you're working heavily in Windows, work in Windows systems. And then I guess if I were to give one other third piece of advice, this is not unsolicited advice, guys. Somebody asked me for this. The other last piece of advice I would tell you is get plugged into communities that are actively working on the things you want to do. We are not, like, we are a cybersecurity community in that we do a lot of Linux, and Linux is the base for pretty much all the cybersecurity stuff that any of you guys do, right? But we are not focused on that. I'm focused on getting people into Linux, and then they spin off and do the cybersecurity. So where I'm going with that is find a community, and if it's not ours, it's some other one that's probably pretty good, and get into security. We got one, I don't even have... Where's my little Twitch thing? I'll pull up Twitch real quick and I'll tell you a good one, because I really like one of these guys. I raid him often. One of the guys that I really like for cybersecurity is, I'll give you guys a link to him. Where's he at? I probably raid Blaze more than anybody. BlazeBits, right? So I'm going to link them to, he's probably got a different YouTube channel, but on YouTube I still linked you guys back to him. Hold on, did my pretzel rocks break? Hold on. I feel like my pretzel rocks broke there. All right. Anyways, we're back. Yeah, so I would definitely tell you guys, find people. So again, that's my thing, is find people that are doing stuff that's interesting to you and similar, and then go and hang out in their communities. See how they talk. See how the engineers talk to each other, and see how cybersecurity people talk, right? Like, oh, there's a lot to it, but yeah, that's a big part of it, I would say. Yeah. But touch Linux every day is probably one of the biggest ones, because if nothing else was going right for you, as long as you're getting in there and doing some Linux, you're still furthering your knowledge in that space, right? All right. So anyways, I'm going to hit Q to get out of this, and then I'm going to come down here, and I did sar-n dev, and then sar-n TCP and eTCP will show me at a higher level, that's a higher layer of my OSI model, if there's any good or bad things happening. So let's go with just TCP every 1 second. I can just see how many TCP streams I have active, how much communications I have in my system, and that's cool. But maybe I was having a problem establishing communications with maybe this system terminates TLS, which is part of transport layer security, right? And that is up at the TCP layer, right? It's at the transport layer, so TCP. And errors in TCP might help me to figure out that I'm having some type of connection problems, right? There's this at a very high level. Again, remember I was talking about kind of like scratching something off that's gilded, like there's a tiny little layer of gold over the top, and you're like scratching that gold off and finding like the lead underneath. That's not great, right? But the point is, this would help me to drill down, and all the things that we looked at here are the basics. All the things that we touched in here, you should be able to go in and say, okay, I do or don't understand what's happening in my system. Oh, there's nothing. This right here is what we would call a nothing burger. Everybody here know what a nothing burger is? It's like, don't even need to look at it. Like, it's almost like I was one of those security guards looking out over a bunch of boxes with my flashlight, you know? And I'm like, I heard a sound for sure, but I don't see anything. So then I just turn around to get murked immediately as soon as I turn around. You just get, killed by Solid Snake or whatever. That was his name, right? Wasn't it, from Metal Gear Solid? Wasn't it Solid Snake? But the point is, all clear on the Western Front, right? There's nothing going on right here that would indicate to me that there was an error. So if I was having error with transmissions or TLS terminations, I would not be looking right now at the connections. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, nothing beef. We used to call people burgers. This is a completely unrelated concept, and some of you are going to be like, man, he just switched gears. We used to call, like, when somebody would go in for like an MMA fight or a boxing fight. So I used to watch a lot of that when I was in my 20s and 30s. I'd hang out with my friends and watch. I watched fights this last weekend, though, so it's not like I don't watch fights anymore. I just don't go out of my way to watch fights as much. And the guy that would, like, go in there, like they call them gatekeepers now, kind of, but gatekeepers are the guys that keep people out of, like, the top 10 or whatever. But we used to call the guy that kind of is just hanging around the division and giving out W's to other people, we would just call him a burger. Like, oh, that guy's he's just beating up another burger, right? That's just the term that we would always use. So I always thought that shit was funny. All right. So now we're going to go dig a little more into, like, the Linux kernel and packages on the system. We're not going to go super deep in there, but we're going to touch some of those pieces. So if anybody wants to do this lab with me, I'm going to link this down on the YouTube side there and over on the Twitch side. Now, I can /pin those, but the reason I don't is because often we'll still be talking about it later. So I guess I'll just tell some people to scroll up, or I'll just give you guys the lab again if anybody needs it. So also, I changed my browser so it's in dark mode. There's things that I normally wouldn't show over here on the right because it gets too bright. And since I put this little dark mode thing on here, these look a lot better. So I had never showed that before on stream about our book. And the reason I did that is because now I can at least show it in dark mode and not flashbang everybody, because people will complain about flashbangs for sure. So let's go look at, this is, I'm going to go up to like level 6 or size 6 over here. And maybe 7's good. It says, you're a new systems administrator at a company. You've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has little or no documentation to it. Man, I'm telling you guys, some of you probably are like, that can't be that bad. All you guys are always joking around about it. I'm 100% sure that this is one of the most, this is one of those things that you'll be like, man, that guy warned me. This is the one thing. Some random guy on the internet tried to warn me that there wouldn't be good documentation around this. Well, I know, guys, I'm a Linux engineer. I've been doing this a long time. I know that we don't document our stuff as good as we should. We should do better. I try to show you guys how I do it, and I try to be better professionally, but sometimes we're just not good at this stuff. So we're going to check some kernel and package info on the system. And we're going to do some other stuff. What's Ranger doing? Ranger's just looking around. He gets pretty antsy. He's an older dog. So let's check all the kernel information. This is just all the information from the kernel. We talked earlier about how we've got a 6.8. So 6 is the major version, 8 is the minor version, and 0-51 is typically, and this can keep incrementing up, but this is typically what we call the patch version of a thing. And if you say, and earlier I was talking about, if you guys are listening to me and you want to learn some of this stuff, get a notepad out, OneNote or something like that, and just take some notes. But this is one of the things that I would tell you you have to learn. There are some things that you have to learn to be in tech, and this is a thing, I'm about to show you guys a thing you have to learn. You have to learn this. Semantic versioning. So I'm going to link it. And if you look at it real quick and you say, I got that. Okay, good. I'm just telling you, this is a concept in engineering that you must know. I have a whole bunch of these, but this is one for sure. If you told me, Scott, I want to be a software engineer, I'd be like, oh, buddy, you're going to live in this. But if you told me, Scott, I want to be a systems engineer and I want to be a platform engineer, and I'm going to go, oh, buddy, you're going to live in this. And if you said, well, no, I don't want to do any of those, I want to be a process engineer, and I go, oh, process engineers, you're going to live in this. Like, there's just some things you have to learn. I mean, I'll list a bunch of them if you guys want to put them in your notes. If somebody tells me to do that, I'll list a bunch of them that I know of, just things that you need to know. I typically just talk about them when we get to them, but if somebody's like, yeah, give me the list, like, I'll do it. Also, I think, hold on, I need to open up my stream. I don't have my stream bot open. Why don't I have streamer bot? I do not have streamer bot open, guys. Hold on. I'm doing what we call effing up by the numbers over here. Oh, also got to check messages. I think my wife might be texting me. Wife's texting me. Stuff's going on. Oh man. My brother Tom just sent this picture. I'm trying to get it put up in the Discord. I guess I could put it in the Discord, but all right. Let me make sure this chat pops out here. I don't know if anybody minds testing chat for me real quick. It's funny, when I sit here and talk a lot, there's very rarely people typing to me, so I don't have a lot to go off of. But okay, we've got uname-a. I appreciate that, Colchis. It did work, by the way. So my little chat did pop up, so I see that. But you guys should be able to. So the reason I said that is now that I have the little streamer bot up, if you do an exclamation mark clip on either side, if anybody does an exclamation mark clip, it'll clip anything that you find that's useful. So if we're just sitting here talking and I say something that you think might be something that you wanted as a clip or something like that, or if I just say something off the cuff and you're like, oh, I'm going to go put this guy on Reddit live stream fails. Yeah, I have an exclamation mark clip now, so you guys could actually do that. So we've got the uname-a and we see the kernel and stuff, and we've got the semantic versioning to understand the version of the kernel. But then there's also some other stuff over here that's kind of important. We can see when it was created, right? This was compiled, when the kernel was compiled, and who did it, right? So Ubuntu did it. You will find some versions of Kali Linux. I'm going to say something that some of you guys aren't going to believe, but Kali Linux, you will find some versions on it, and I have one of them still on my servers. When you do a uname-a, it says right here, compiled by Microsoft on Kali Linux. And you say, really? Yep. I remember going, ooh, brother, ooh, what is that? And then anyways, here's x86-64, right? So x86-64 is our architecture, right? And I showed earlier you could do a uname-m and see that as well. And that's a very important thing. There's some scripts that we sometimes download where you see that. Yeah, the Premium, Kali and Parrot are your go-to cybersecurity. Are you going to do so? Premium, one of the members of our community put together Malbian Linux. So if you get into pen testing heavily, one of can be, and I say members of our community, they show up every now and then. I don't know. I say they because I don't know if they're male or female or any of that stuff. But yeah, they put together this because they wanted to go past their certification, so they built their own little version of Linux, which is for pen testing. So I think that's really cool. Like, I think you had a tool, you had an itch, and you wanted to do, they actually work in malware analysis and reverse engineering. I've tried to tell Camby to go and start streaming. I'm like, you do stuff that people genuinely think they want to do. You should show them if they really do want to do it or not, right? Because, I mean, everybody thinks they want to do reverse engineering, but then when they see what they're actually doing, they're like, ugh. No, I'll just go be a platform engineer like Scott and just hang out and not do anything. Yeah, so Premium, that's a version of Linux you can download and run in a virtual environment and play with and all that good stuff. So anyway, so I'm getting far afield, but over here we do an ls boot, and we can see what versions of the kernel exist on the system. Now, we can match those versions to what we see up here. But now, because Ubuntu tries to be super helpful to us and give us these colored things, we might want to figure out what those are. I'll echo 1 in there because that's how many kernels we have. Let's do that same command, ls, and we're going to give it an option-l. And that option is going to affect the output in such a way that it's going to give us a long listing. Ls is typically a listing. And we're going to go a little smaller, sorry. Go a little bit smaller right there, just so it fits. But one more down. I know we got to go one more down to fit it. But now we see that boot VM Linux is actually just mapped over to here. So this is the only one that's really there. That one's not really there. And the old one is also pointing to that one. So how many kernels actually exist on the system? Only one. Even though originally we saw 3 presented, the other 2 are literally just soft links back to this one that exists. There you go. Okay, so keep coming down. Now we might want to know how many packs. So we looked at the version of the system. Like we know a little bit. It's almost like what engine's under your hood, if you will. It's not exactly one-to-one because engines translate to power, and this doesn't mean anything about power. This is just the capabilities of the kernel. Semantic versioning and understanding the version of something you're on is very important for, if drivers have been tested with something, if, certain components can work with it, if hardware works with it and has been tested with certain drivers. And you can be on extreme fringe edge cases in some of your careers. Some of you are going to go into like high performance compute like me, and I'm using like really brand new Dell equipment that does not work without brand new Dell drivers that are being updated even in the monthly time frame. And sometimes there are known bugs that we find and we turn up into their support and give them, and then they patch things for us, right? Because we're such a big, my company's not even that big. It's just we do so much stuff for Dell that we feed them back problems and things like that so that they can make their stuff better. Now we get probably a faster cadence than like another company does, but that's a lot of times while we're building out new government systems, and then once we get to a hardened, working, stable system, then they will typically coalesce that down and give that out to the community or whatever, right? But this is part of being part of like that development community, even though you're developing supercomputers and hardware drivers, right? That kind of stuff. But we're going to go look next. I'm going to make this a little bigger again. We'll go look next at like the packages on the system. So how many packages are on the system right here? dpackage-l would dump a whole bunch of shit to the screen. And with the word count-l, it will count the number of lines that came out. And I'll prove that to you like this. We could just do dpackage-l, and it'll show a bunch of stuff, and I can go all the way to the bottom by holding spacebar, and it says 815 right there. Or I could also do this. I could pipe that through NL, which will put a number at the beginning of each line for me. It's number lines, and that'll tell me that we have about 815. I know it's not super pretty because of the size, but yeah, that's pretty cool. That's good to know. But basically, I can do this and just count up all the lines if I'm being lazy. I don't want to do it myself. I'm not nearly as good at it as the computer is, so I'm going to let the computer and the tools do that for me. But at the end of the day, we took the standard output from a command. We captured it with a thing called a pipe, or it's a redirection with a pipe. And the standard output that was going to come to the screen got captured and thrown into the standard input of the next command. And you could just keep chaining these things along. In fact, you can go in the Discord and find where people are just chaining a bunch of stuff together. And I think it's hilarious, but it's a little game that people will play. Also, there's a thing with Perl, where we used to do stuff like that. We'd try to play the game of what's the shortest one-liner, or what's the most we can do in one line without, doing multiple lines. And I always thought that was kind of funny. And then we would get in the arguments of if you're allowed to use semicolons, because semicolon is the end of a line in Perl, right? But what if it's all on the same command line? And they're like, well, but you're kind of writing a program at that point, so you're defeating the spirit of it. And you're like, well, but it word wrapped, so now once it wraps, then it's not really on the line either. So now if we want to be pedantic about things, we can really... Anyways, all right, let's stop with that. But I can go look for a specific package. So dpackage-l dumped everything to the screen, right? It tried to dump everything to the screen. We captured it and said, filter, grep is your filter, right? It stands for like a GNU regular expression processor or some totally completely unrelated thing, which name I can never remember. But it's something about regular expressions, right? And I said ignore case, so that was a option that I gave it to change its normal behavior, because normally it does care about upper and lower case. This would only find these. It would not find these over here, and I'll prove that to you real quick, because I like to prove things to you guys. But when we ignore case, right, When we ignore case, now we get the upper and lower case, so that's good. And sometimes you want one and sometimes you want the other, and this is a good thing to understand. Yeah, well, Colchis, I tell people all the time, it's super valuable to understand things about yourself, right? It's super valuable. Like if you understand that about yourself, then you know your limitations around something, right? Like if I'm like, man, I can't stand another person smacking their lips on this meeting or something, well, then at least I can put myself on mute and scream into my pillow that I keep right here to scream into. I'm just kidding. I don't really have a scream pillow, but if you guys have ever watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, when they have to do some of that stupid shit that Mac wants to do, they have a scream pillow. That's the episode with Country Mac, which is one of my favorite episodes ever, where Mac thinks he's really good at karate, but he doesn't have a black belt, but he enters the tournament and gets his ass kicked. Yeah, scream pillows are essential. You just need to know when you're on mute, really. There's a great scene in a not great movie. The movie itself is funny, but I just wouldn't recommend it to people. It's called Dracula Dead and Loving It. It's an old Mel Brooks movie. And there's a scene in it where Mel Brooks, they go to stake this vampire, and he moves behind this pillar right before it happens. And when they stake this vampire, they dump like 500 gallons of blood into this room. They just shoot it up out of this corpse. It's this hilarious scene that they just shot blood up into the room. And then he steps back from behind the pillar after the blood's done, and the guys look at him and goes, "How come you don't have blood all over you?" And he goes, "You just have to know where to stand at these things." It's this great scene. Just Blaren, how's it going? Yeah, I'm doing good. We are hanging out, talking about Linux, talking about helping people get into the field. I have a set of labs that are up on Killer Coda, which is free, by the way, guys. Killer Coda doesn't cost anything. And then you guys can here. Let me link this lab I'm in right here to some of you guys. Anybody that wants to do it with me, and we're just kind of going through and looking at stuff on systems, and then I'm just adding them over to the right as we keep talking about it. And then I use a tool called Revolver Tabs over there. Revolver Tabs is one of my favorite things that's ever been put in Chrome because I've used that professionally a lot. I'll wait. I can wait for ads. So guys, over on the Twitch side, we got ads, so I got to wait another 50 seconds or so for the ads to end, and then we'll get back to talking about this stuff. And then Profits TV said, "Greetings, how's it going?" We are doing that. We'll give them 35 more seconds. It says the ad has 35 more seconds. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I'm going to wait just until the end of the ad break for a few more seconds, and then we'll keep going. But I was just saying I add stuff to the right over here as we talk about it. So you've got the semantic versioning, which I really think people need to know to be a good engineer. In engineering in general, you need to understand versions. We have Malby and Linux, which one of the members of our community made for their own version of, it's a Debian-based malware analysis and reverse engineering box that they put together. So there's that. All right, people should be back. So over here, we have dpackage-l, grep-issh, and now we can go and look. So if we were to have been told by our server or by our security team, maybe we got a security team that runs all the, typically it's like your GRC team, which is your governance, risk, and compliance. And that team will typically come in and tell you, hey, OpenSSH-server, right? So OpenSSH server, 1.9.5 and below has this vulnerability that was just published to the CVE, right? NIST maintains all of, that's National Institute of Standards and Technologies. They maintain the CVEs, and there are companies that go and pull those CVEs and all the checks and put them into these automated testing, and then you typically have to pay them. You could write your own. Guys, you could absolutely write your own of these. But a lot of companies, Nessus is one, Nessus Tenable Security. Those are, Nessus is by Tenable Security. And then, what's some of the other ones? Qualys is one. They just scan your systems for vulnerabilities. And one of the things they do is they scan for versions because version numbers are specifically applied. So if they told me 1.9.5 was bad, then I could go and say, well, we're past that, so that vulnerability doesn't apply to us. It was patched out, in this version, and that does not apply to us. So then I would be able to give my security team the all good that version doesn't exist. Now, if they scan and find it, now we got a problem, right? But this is why we want to be able to do this. Now, what I'm showing you guys here is all on one system. And I often tell you guys this, like, we do things to learn them on one system. But then when we go to do them for our company, we do them at scale. We do them across hundreds or thousands of servers. And then we pull the information back into one place and build reports and that kind of stuff. And that's one of those things that I really love Ansible for pulling reports. I have labs on here that show you guys how to build reports out of Ansible, because I really think that that's a thing that can be a game changer in your career, because you're not even hardly doing anything, but you look like a rock star, because you're basically meeting your manager where they're at. Your manager wants usable information to come out of these systems to be able to report up usage and all this other crap. And you're sitting back here pulling that information for them in an automated fashion while you're watching Netflix during the day. And people always joke around. They're like, haha, Scott, you actually say you watch Netflix, but I bet you work really hard. Guys, I work all the time, like 24/7. But almost all the time I'm working, I'm also sitting here watching Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. You know, I don't insert whatever you want, playing Brotato. I can do all kinds of other things if I understand what's going on in the system, understand where my breakpoints are, where I can wait, and that kind of stuff. All right, so that was that whole lab. That lab was very simple. The idea of it was you were a new systems admin at a company, and you've been tasked with finding out information about a servers with little to no documentation about it. And now I know a lot of you guys are probably like, man, this guy is overly cynical about being an admin and how bad documentation is going to be. But I can tell you guys, the ones around here that know, if you've been in IT, you know that servers are always aging off. Servers are always coming in and out of inventory. And it's spend all day watching Netflix. Hey, Ellipses, how's it going? Over on the YouTube side. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We're going to go to the next lab here. Also, I got a little dark mode reader, so my stuff doesn't pop up in white mode nearly as often. All right. I'm gonna let you guys vote, and I'm going to vote based off of what I see. Actually, I could make a vote on the Twitch side, but no, we'll vote based off of what I see you guys say. Do you guys want to keep doing this basic Linux stuff, or do you guys want me to jump over into security stuff? Because I'll jump over into security stuff if we want to. I'm just doing intro Linux stuff here, but we're still going to do all Linux, but I'll jump over to security stuff if you guys want. Normally with my college students, I go with the first thing I see, but with you guys, I'll wait and I'll kind of weigh up between Twitch and YouTube what people say. Lipsies, you're playing Mario Kart? Nice. Is on a Switch or something? Just Blair said, to be honest, I'm a new Linux user with the sin of using Arch Start. I tell guys, I don't mind what versions you guys use to start. And well, I don't mind I don't care what versions anybody uses, but I won't like scold anybody for doing that, because if you were doing zero Linux yesterday and now you're actually doing something, I think that's better than sitting around and waiting for the perfect intro or distro or whatever, right? Like there's an old saying, like, good is the enemy of great. And there's another one that says you don't go when you're ready, you go when you're ready enough. It's like the point is just start, right? Like fucking just start, man. Like start doing something. Get into anything. Zorgal, how's it going over on the Twitch side? Yeah, we'll keep going. I'm not hearing anything, so we'll just keep moving forward. So this is lab 3. I'm going to link the lab to people. Sometimes I pin the lab, sometimes I don't. Thanks for the follow, by the way. Two Bolblick. I don't know how to say that, but I'm just going to call you Two. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We are just walking through Linux as an introduction, I guess, if you will. Like simple stuff. Oh, you got Switch 2. Nice. Then your Subaru died. Oh, man. You know, Ellipses, yeah, I can't imagine many repairs anymore nowadays are less than like $1,000 on vehicles. Like, man, my wife will take the car down just to get an oil change, and it'll be a few $100, you know. She'll take her car down. she mostly goes to dealership because the other place I take it sometimes jacks up her skid plate under her car, so it's kind of bad. Premium said, when I come to choosing distros, when I ask some Discord community, some people tell me don't listen to those to tell you to go with Arch because they're femboys. Well, I will tell you that, like, my number one decision making, if I were trying to get into the industry and do this stuff professionally, right? My number one decision making around my Linux OS that I use would be how much other people are using it that will pay me to use it, if that makes sense. Otherwise, by the way, I would say do literally whatever you want in this life, right? Like, do literally whatever you want. Like, I'm a big freedom guy. But if your goal is to, like, align with the industry and get in, it's Red Hat, it's Ubuntu, it's, you know, these ones that are actually being codified into, you know, support platforms and these kind of things. Two Bolvik, yeah, you said you bought the book. Currently struggling landing interviews for any help desk IT support role. So you're this is over on Twitch, by the way. Said he subbed on YouTube for a while, saw it live. Yeah, you're welcome to always hang out, and hopefully the book helps. Currently struggling landing interviews for any help desk IT support role. You're not even getting to the interview. That's almost always something you got to fix on your resume. By the way, guys, we haven't done it in a while. I haven't shown you guys this in a while, but you can drop your resume, and I would de-identify it just for, you know. But you got to think about it. Your resume is already out there probably in the world, but we've got a thing that the jobs and interviews discussion, and while most of the time it just looks like people arguing, there is some good stuff in there. And if you were to drop like a de-identified version of your resume, we would look at it and give you advice. I'll show you guys my resume that I use. Couple of things. So because the resume is like one of the first things to get into the industry, obviously. Let me pull up I use a de-identified resume, right? My little current generic short. Hold on. Let's get that other thing out of the way. So this is like a generic version of my resume that has other phone numbers, other stuff on it. But to get, so I'm not a big fan of putting anything on your resume that you can't speak to in the interview, because somebody's going to ask you something if anything looks cool or that you know about, right? So I need to change that to 17 years. It'll be 17 in December, so we're getting right there. But what I would tell you is you do need to tailor your resume when you send a resume to a company. This is my generic one, right? But if it were heavily, let's say I was heavily looking at trying to get into like Kubernetes, right? I would 100% lead with like my Kubernetes certifications. They would be up here near the top, so they see them, because they're also probably using some filters, right? So I'm going to want that on there. But I would play up then in here stuff that I had done to like deploy OpenShift for this company. Because when I was the platform engineering lead for, this is AAA, by the way. Some of you guys know that I worked for AAA. These were things I really did. Everything on here is real for me, right? But I would change these around because this is more for when I'm talking platform engineering and security stuff right here. And then I would change it over to like stuff I built out with OpenShift. I actually tested OpenShift between Ceph and Gluster, because OpenShift used to have, I said Ceph, C-E-P-H. C-E-P-H. Yeah, between Ceph, right, and then that. So anyways, all right. Oh, guys, by the way, I'm missing chat and stuff because I'm doing other stuff. Then I have other stuff that I teach, right? I teach at a college. Some of you guys know that. I'm visiting professor 3. These are classes I've taught. And then down here is my education. My education's way down. I want you guys, like, thinking about stuff that's important up at the top. Wait, so I'm missing some stuff. Hold on. I only dream of 1300 repair. Yeah, Julius. Nowadays, that stuff's super expensive. Abdolo said, is there any plans to do a course about Ansible automation platform on the enterprise level? Abdo, I don't have access to Ansible automation platform anymore. I ran Tower, and then I moved up to Ansible automation platform. I could do a course on Ansible and deploying with AWX and show all that type automation. But there's a lot more with Ansible automation platform that I wouldn't have access to do, unfortunately. I could probably show some things with it, but my automation course that I'm planning out and building now is going to focus. And by the way, that course is going to be free, guys. That Ansible automation course that I'm putting together is probably going to focus on the tool Ansible and then how we run, like AWX, which is the upstream of Tower, right? And we may even do it with Ascender, which is a platform from Ascender, like Ascend a Tower or something. Ascend comes from CIQ, the same guys that do Rocky and the same guys that do Werewolf. So, hold on, I'm missing stuff over on Twitch. I agree with having experience with package manager in system configuration convention that will be used in place of work. The reputation of Arch is pretty hands, which might be a very good thing for someone that's new. Conversely, more or less the whole point of enterprise distros is to be rock solid. It might not prompt you to interact with this off. Yeah, sure. So, I would just say the thing you have to be able to put on your resume is experience with that tool, though, right? So, like, you could, I guess you could put on there you have 2 years experience with Red Hat, if but I would tell you probably want to have spent some time with Red Hat to be able to say that, right? So, 12 weeks says like 1% chance. I've been trying to earn more certs to fill the hole. Haven't worked since laid off in 2020. Have a 2-year diploma in IT and ITIL A plus working on M365 fundamentals. Okay. Yeah. So so I would definitely lead with the things that are strong for what you're looking for. 2. I'm just going to tell you 2. And then I would tell you to tailor your resume for each job. So if we were looking at a specific job, right? Let's go over here. This is going to be, well, this might not be bright actually. Hold on. God damn it. Stop spinning for a second so I can type DICE in there. So we go to DICE and we look for Linux admin, right? Or in your case, help desk, right? So we want a help desk in Phoenix, Arizona. And we go look for whatever help desk. And sometimes we recognize names like this, where this is actually like a staffing company. So maybe we want to do it directly for a company. So we might ignore some of those. I think some of these are all talent. These are all people looking for whatever. But maybe we can find an actual organization. I don't know what Nightwing is, but that's probably something similar as well. Yeah. These ones want you to know electronic medical records, right? Or at least that. And maybe this is a real company. I don't know if this is a real company or not, guys, but let's say it was. And then Rupert, how's it going? We're just kind of hanging out and looking at stuff right here. So then, we're looking for help desk work, let's say. So we come down here and here's the job description. They want us to be able to provide technical end user support via telephone. So for me, I would focus on jobs I've done or things I know that are around end user support. You might put down that you've done ticketing. If they tell us the ticketing system, and then you can go read a little bit about it, like maybe you've done some ServiceNow and ServiceNow is their tool, then we want to put that on there, familiar with ServiceNow for resolving technical end user support. And at the end of the day, you just have to be able to talk about the things that you understand. The things that I would want to emphasize then is things that I had done where I was providing support to people, right? Excellent oral and written communication. If you have a way to show people like a GitHub or something that you've done that shows that your written word and documentation's good, that would help, right? So these are the kind of things they want you to maybe have some software application support. Maybe you've done Outlook or something like that, because that's probably something you're going to help with. And then familiarity and good working knowledge in PC hardware and software troubleshooting. So that right there is, that's your secure or your A plus, right? A plus is the hardware side of that, and then software troubleshooting is pretty much just having been some kind of desktop support before. So my point in saying all that is, if I were looking for work, right? If I were looking for work with this kind of stuff, and I'm not even getting in through these jobs, I would look at my resume. I would think my resume needs to be tailored to each one, and I would think that I need to put the types of things that align with what they're asking for, so I can at least get to the interview. You mentioned you haven't even gotten an interview yet. I would think with like a 2-year diploma, if you've got like an ITIL 3 or 4 cert, I definitely have that on there. If you have your A plus, I definitely have it on there. And then if you're studying for like M365 fundamentals, I would definitely put that on there as well. Yeah, I can't believe how often my ads are going off. Are my ads going off a lot, or is it just that I'm talking a lot and not realizing it? Um, Even before this, I often like because people tell me they want to get in the industry, but then they struggle with what they're trying to do, and then I start asking questions around what do you want to do, and then I show them some of those other things we have where we go and we look at like what do we want to do, which is a self-assessment, right? Self-assessment is what do we know we can do and what do we want to do, and then we start to align those because that's a big part of getting a job that you want as well. Hold on, what's the wife saying? Wife says she's heading home. All right. So let's go back over here for a little bit, and we're gonna let this thing keep spinning over here. Just stuff going on, but we are doing basic sysadmin stuff over here. So people that want to learn Linux and get into Linux, we are up to lab 3 now of the free labs on Killer Code. I think Killer Code is one of the best things on the web. It's free. So you're new sysadmin at a company. You've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has very little to no documentation on it. That's how all of these start, right? We're going to check physical disk. We're going to look at the number of disks and do all this kind of stuff. So the first thing we might do is go into the server. We find ourselves sitting at the server. And let's go look at how many disks are here. Well, there's one actual physical disk. It's a dev VDA. Well, it's probably actually a virtual disk. But to us, I mean, there's one actual disk. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 partitions to this disk. So we're going to do something with that here in a second. And we can go look a little bit at it with LSBlock. LSBlock will show us the disk or the block device. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 partitions off it. And I can also see where they're mounted over here and all that kind of stuff. And then block ID will also show me other information about those partitions. The thing that I care about on these partitions is the type, because that'll tell me about the file system that we're dealing with. So dev VDA 16 right here is type ext4, and that is mounted as my /boot in the system. /boot is where all of my kernels go and all of my grub information for booting my system. And then my VDA1, where's VDA1 at? Right here. That's also type ext4, and type ext4 is a common journaling file system. You're going to run into currently right now, you're going to run into 2 types of journaling file systems that'll mostly be on your systems. It'll be ext4 or XFS. There's things like Btrfs, it's BTRFS, and then there's things like ZFS that you're going to run into, but probably not a lot out in the industry. You may run into some of those and maybe some of your backend SAN. In your backend SAN, that's storage area network SAN, you will also run into a lot of these big clustered file systems, which will be Lustre, Lustre, and also Weka is a huge one, Weka, and then GPFS, which is Global Parallel File System by IBM. That's huge in like the supercomputing world. Those ones. What other ones are big in there? Those are probably the big ones. There are other ones that do interesting things, but they're not parallel file systems. Like Ceph is an object storage that you can use in interesting ways, but it's not necessarily that's CEPH, Ceph. CEPH. Ceph is owned by Red Hat and IBM as well. I guess ZFS was owned. Well, ZFS used to be on Sun, so if it was owned by Sun, then it is Oracle now. But I don't know if that's true. But yeah, it was ZFS was heavily used on Solaris back when I was using Solaris, and then Solaris was owned by Sun, and then Sun Microsystems was bought by Oracle. So then they ceased to exist, and all their property went to Oracle. They also owned Lustre back then, and then Oracle was like, "Ooh, what is this?" And they like threw it back to the open source community and didn't even work on it anymore. So, if you ever use Lustre, which Lustre is in like a lot of the big supercomputers in the world, They don't even use. It's not even maintained by them anymore. Oh yeah, I have Sun Microsystem keyboards around here somewhere. I have a lot of hardware. My wife's always trying to get rid of my old stuff, and I just hide it in different offices that I have, because she thinks I have too much stuff. So we're going to add this in there. That's going to answer our questions, and then our validations are going to be successful. We're going to go to the next part, and we're going to say, now check the file system type and mount points. So we actually can look right here and see the mount points over here on the right. So we can have ls block tell us the mount points for these disks. Okay. All right, so echo the name of that file and all that. Okay, so we come down here and we can maybe mount and grep for VDA. So mount will show us everything that's mounted on the system. So we can type mount in without anything, and that's going to be a big mess to the screen. And then we can count how many lines that would have been. It would have been 22 lines. And then maybe we pop up here and we look at all the things that are there. Oh, so ZFS was open source before? Nice. I didn't know that. I haven't followed it. Yeah. I've only used, last time I touched ZFS was probably 2012. So I'm very far out of the ZFS game, but I did like the way that I could pool the different things, and I could there was just a lot of functionality as an operating system that I had with ZFS, so I was a fan of it. I just, back then I didn't have my own home lab and stuff like that, so I didn't do any labbing on it, but it would be interesting to do some OpenZFS in our labs, because I have, like, now you guys know I have a significant amount of lab space, but I really do need to update my storage game, because my storage, I probably only have a full storage of aggregate, maybe about 8 terabytes aggregate across all my servers. Guys, that's not very big nowadays, right? That's not I know people who have, video libraries that are up and around 100 terabytes now. So, like, the number of terabytes I have is not that great, but I guess all my systems could probably be a little better. But anyways, we'll look block ID. And block ID will show us that we're on ext4 file system type, so that's important. We could also use, we should be able to do tune2fs against boot VDA1. Oh, whoops, dev VDA1. What am I thinking? And can't type today. And that should show us, where's the review? Should be able to just, I have this somewhere else where I keep all this, but -L. Yeah, here it is. -L will just list everything. Hey, how's it going, Rob? We were talking about you a little while ago, and I was saying how Rob's one of the reasons that I've stuck with this as long as I have. I saw that you'd give me some shout-outs earlier, too, so I definitely appreciate you guys coming by. For people that don't know me, I'm just a high-performance compute and Linux engineer and general nerd and all that kind of stuff. We've been talking about getting into Linux, and on the right side, you just got my little revolver tab spinning, and on the left side, you have this lab. This lab I will link to you guys. And this lab is free over on Killer Coda. It's a free site. And what I'm doing is in Lab 3, we're talking about Linux commands for file systems and mount points. And the premise, by the way, Rob, will you tell them that I'm not lying about this? This is the premise of all of these early labs. You are a new systems administrator at a company, and that you've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has little or no documentation about it. So the way I set them up is, basically the manager came in, he told you, hey, and he's ecstatic that he finally has an admin, and he's going to pat you on the shoulder and go, oh, you, and you're going to be sitting there going, hey, do we have any documentation on this? And he's just going to tap you on the shoulder and go, oh, you. And he's going to turn around and walk out because it's your problem now. You're the one who has to go and figure it all out. So one of the things I always tell the guys is have your method for gathering notes, right? I use Notepad. I have a bunch of Notepad stuff open. Some people love Obsidian, all kinds of stuff like this. So, yeah, Rob, I actually didn't, and I feel bad because I wasn't in your stream today. I've been in your stream quite a few times the last few days, but not today. So hopefully you guys were doing good stuff. I know you've been kind of mobile a few times, and then I know you're kind of co-working as you're streaming and stuff. So I do pop in there. Yeah, I do pop in there every now and then, but I didn't get in there today. So what I was showing kind of then down in our solutions, you can just hit the buttons on these. And we were looking at the disks that were in this system. There's one block device, Dev VDA, and then it's partitioned down into 4 different partitions. And then we could start gathering information about what's going on those partitions. We can see what the label is. Now the label is a little bit you can label a disk any way you want. So these are little missing, or they're not great, but we can go see what the system sees for what's on there. So like type exFAT and all these other things like that. So Control Byte, I appreciate that.
But he's more than just a Linux master. He's a prodigious, transcendent, and unrivaled black belt, an illuminating and sagacious educator, a true luminary in the world of Twitch science and technology.
Now Control Byte is right about all those things he just said about me. I'm just kidding. I'm also super humble. Rob, you're using KubeSpray and incremental. Yeah, I remember you were doing upgrades, Rob. Yeah. That's a fun one. So ZFS is so good. Merge, RAID redundancy rate. Yeah. I remember ZFS being good when I used it, but it's been 2012 I think is the last time I touched it. And I do remember the pooling, and the snapshots I remember, and I also remember how easy it was on older Solaris systems to just flip between disks. We always had a primary and a secondary disk, and we could just flip between what was the boot disk whenever we wanted. And I remember that was always nice. So, Control Byte, I appreciate your resubscription with Prime. You can use that anywhere, but you chose to use it here, so that's always cool. The TTS is kind of nice, right? I also use, so sometimes people pop in here and they wonder the tools I use. I have a thing called Revolver Tabs, and Revolver Tabs just sits on a Google Chrome, and it just goes through, and then these are our monitoring within our home lab here, right? These are the ProLug type labs. These are all the people that have gotten themselves locked out of my system. Well, they're not locked out yet. They get locked out after 6 attempts, right? Yeah, Revolver Tabs is fun. It's not being supported anymore though, so I really do hope something steps up for Revolver Tabs because it's not being supported anymore. But I tell people will see these and they'll see me like go through a bunch of these, especially like in a work environment. And I tell them, like, I used to put these up on the wall on like a 65-inch screen TV inside of like a data center, inside of a NOC, right, Network Operations Center. And then I would just put on Revolver Tabs, and it would look as professional as anything I've ever seen. So, Talisman Solutions, hopefully this stuff's useful to you. Thanks for gifting that to Rob. I'm sure he appreciates it. If you guys don't know, Rob is probably one of the most successful Linux, type streamers around. So if you guys don't follow him, you should. I don't think any of my mods are here, because if my mods were here, they would shout out RWX Rob. So if you guys haven't seen him, you guys should definitely follow his stuff. And I hang out there pretty regularly, if you guys don't know. But to move this lab forward, you did have to add these answers, and then my back-end check will build that. And by the way, Rob, I don't know if you've ever played with this. Yeah, no, definitely get some sleep. But if you guys ever wonder, I do have a GitHub, and probably the most useful GitHub I have is the ProLug Labs, probably the one that most people do stuff with. And this one has all the labs. So if you were to go to like one of these labs and you needed to cheat for some reason, you can actually go in here and see what the win condition or the finish condition is for each of these. So for this one, you have to have those values in that system, right? So it's super easy to get started. So you can actually clone somebody's and just use them. Oh, I appreciate that, Rob. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I tell people, man, our goal around here is to get people into doing this professionally because I really do think anybody can do it. I just think you have to spend time. It would be like if somebody said, Scott, do you think you could learn Russian? Rob speaks Russian, if you guys don't know. And I'd be like, well, I don't think I'm smart enough to learn Russian. I don't think most people would believe that. I think most people could speak Russian if they wanted to. Or let's just say, I don't know, Mexican, Spanish. Um, and by the way, I'm from Arizona, so Mexican and Spanish are different languages. But anyway, so I want to learn a language, and I'm going to spend some time with that language. I think anybody can do that, right? Yeah, yeah, and I think people can do this stuff. The Echo does not output none. What does that mean? What's that? Where are you at? You got to tell me where you're at because I'm on a different part of the lab right now, probably. Abdo. The Echo does not output none. I'm not sure what that is. All right. So we can go look at the individual VDA commands. What's Rob? Yeah, Rob, what's your YouTube channel? Somebody just asked over on Twitch. I think it's RWX Rob on YouTube. I think. I can check, guys. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I'll give you guys his YouTube channel, too. Oh, here, wait, hold on. Here's his link tree. Hold on. Echo does not output none. Oh, it doesn't output anything, you mean? Oh, so what's happening here? Hold on. So I apologize. So when you echo 1, right, that will just come to standard output, right? So this is standard input of me at a terminal, and this is coming out to the screen. But we're catching that, right? So we're catching that with a redirect. So this greater than sign says, take all this echo that was going to come to the screen, and catch it and throw it into this file. I think this is the question you're asking. So now I'm going to paste that real quick. And we throw it into the file. Now if we cat the file, the contents of the file are what would have come to the screen. So does that make sense over on the YouTube side? So it's not coming to the screen anymore. Now it's throwing it into a file. And then that file is what's being read. If you checked in my GitHub and I was saying how you could go cheat, that's where it is actually at. Yeah. So that's the difference. You could just echo something to the screen and it will come to standard out. But then you catch it with this redirect and throw it into a file. There's multiple types of redirects, right? This is a greater than sign. One greater than sign will just write over into a file and clobber whatever in there. 2 greater than signs. So if I did this, it would append to the file. So if I did this a whole bunch of times, whoops. If I did this a bunch of times and then catted out root disks, it would just keep. But then if I did this one time, it would clobber the contents. That's my favorite line. It'll clobber it back to nothing. Yeah, Talisman, you said human beings are knowledge sponges of varied porosity. Yeah. One sufficient amount of time and exposure will acquire. Yeah. I agree. And I think there's ways to speed it up. I think there's things that people can do. Like I tell people, I have a whole bunch of talks on like how to stay sharp as an engineer and how to stay relevant in the industry and stuff. I'm not necessarily doing that now, but I do have talks that I do on that. And I think that people can get better at learning if you stay consistent with things, right? If you always are working towards your goal. I tell people it's better to do 30 minutes a day of Linux than it is to try to do like 4 hours of Linux on a Sunday night. Like, just think about it. Like something you love doing. If you love doing something, you love writing. Could you imagine just waiting until, you had, look at my dog down there. Could you imagine waiting until the end of the week to do it for like 4 hours and try to cram it? No, you would do it as often as you could. And that's why I kind of think you guys doing this Linux stuff should try to get your hands on it as much as you can. And I tell you guys all the time, and some people don't believe me, but I live at a command line like this literally all day. This is what I do all day, right? Across multiple screens, just Linux. And I think you guys can do it too. Some people can't sit there like that all day. It'll ruin their life. But for the rest of you guys, I think you guys can do it if you want to. And obviously there's various levels of this. Like, you guys have been the last few days watching Rob do, like, Rob will kind of work on stuff and talk with you guys and work on stuff and talk with you guys. And it's like, that's a very valid way to work. I mean, you guys hear me talk all the time about how I'm kicking stuff off and running automation that I've built and Ansible playbooks and watching Netflix while they run. And that's not me being facetious. I really do other things. But do I get my 8 hours in? Do I get my work done? Sure. And it's actually a little more than 8 hours in engineering, guys. Most of the time, an engineering company expects you to work about 45 to 50 hours. But here's the thing. If I'm on at 5 a.m. or if I'm off at 3 o'clock every day, it doesn't matter as long as my stuff's getting done. And I know I've heard Rob tell you guys that before, but I'm telling you that. I've never, in 20 years of engineering, I have never once been late. Do you know why? Because an engineer, it doesn't matter when you're there. I mean, I've never been late to work because I'm like a wizard. I show up when I intend to, and then I'll stay late if I need to, or I'll flex my time and be on over the weekend. So, like, I used to tell my boss, he's like, you know, he'd ask me, he's like, Scott, you kind of cut out a little early on Fridays. And I'm like, yeah, but you've never heard me complain about working a Saturday night, have you? Because he knows if I'm on something, I'll be on that thing for 20 hours a day. Like, I'll do 20 hours a day on something until I get it working. I'll work on stuff until I pass out. And that's not like a dedication to work. That's because I hate getting beaten by systems that are, you know, not doing what they're supposed to do. So, yeah. So, all right. So, anyways, we're here. This is, and by the way, the reason I built the labs like this is kind of to let you guys walk around and kind of survey what's going on in the system, right? You can see an output, and then you can go throw that output into a file. You can cat that file if you wanted to, right, to look at what's going on there. We cat etcfs tab. That's the file that defines where things are going to be mounted on the system, right? So there's a lot of information here. I'll make it a little smaller so it looks better. But there's a lot of information here in etcfs tab on how things are being mounted as the system comes up, right? Julius Caesar said, "Does most Linux sysadmin work remote or on site?" I was working remote, probably half the time, even before COVID started. But once COVID was running, I'd say most Linux stuff can be done remotely. Some companies nowadays just want people to come in because maybe they are going to have some hardware requirements. Like I work for NOAA, which is National Oceanographic Atmospheric Agency, NOAA, huge company, right? Huge organization within the government. It's NOAA. 2 A's. Anyways, my stupid thing can't hear what I'm saying, but I happen to live like 5 miles from one of their data centers. Like, it's right down the road. It's literally on the same road that is connected to my house, right? Like, it's right down the road from me. So knowing that, that is, I do have to go in the data center. In fact, I was in the data center yesterday morning to work on some stuff. But do I always go in the data center? Absolutely not. I only go in the data center when I'm needed. Most of the time I can work remotely because I work on systems here and in Manassas, Virginia. So that's, I can't go to Manassas, Virginia every day. We got guys on site out there that can do stuff, but I'm in here, So no, I think any Linux thing I have where I don't need to touch, like when I'm not touching a server, yeah, I could do all my work remotely for the most part. So we can go look at the systems and see how those disks are actually found. If we do dev disk by label, we see boot is actually the dev VDA16, UEFI is actually dev VDA15, and then Cloud IMG rootfs is dev VDA1. And you might say, well, Scott, how did you get dev out of that? I don't agree with that. That's not dev. But it is relative to where we're at. So look at this. We're down in dev disk by label. So we're in a directory, then we're in a subdirectory, and then we're in a subdirectory. So when this says when this says it's linked to up to a parent directory VDA16, what they mean is from by label, you go up to its parent here, and then you go up to its parent here. So /dev/VDA16 should exist. So if I ls/dev, I should expect each one of these three to be in there. They are, but let's go look. Here's VDA16, VDA16, VDA15, and VDA1. And if I wanted to shorten that output, I could say VDA only show me the VDA stuff, and then I would be able to validate, yes, those do actually exist in the place that Scott just said, relative to the link. Does everybody see that? That's how that mapping works. The ... is my parent of my parent. So it's my parent directory of this is in dev, because we're down in disk by label, right? So if you're not familiar with relative and absolute pathing, that's one of those skills that I tell you need to spend time with and learn. But I think once I show you guys like absolute and relative pathing, you get it pretty well. I have a talk where I do that. So we're not going too deep into that right now, but that's the way we do it. And then we can just run this little command and see all the different types of mappings. There's a bunch of sequences, if we wanted to see devices by sequence. If we wanted to see devices by label, here's our labels. We just looked at those. If we wanted to use the part UUID, the part UUID is also a way that we can map into etcfs tab if we wanted to. Then we also have by the path, so we can tell what PCI path it's on if this was physically connected in some way. And we really dig into PCI path when we're on physical boxes, because sometimes the mapping is not what we expect across a set of like 30 servers, and then maybe we have to do some check in our scripts or in our Ansible playbooks to look for the right PCI path. Maybe all the boxes are like PCI this right here for VDA 15, or maybe they're all this one. Let's say this part 1 for VDA 1, but one box, maybe one of the maybe 15 servers that we bought from Dell, one of them has a different motherboard, and the PCI slots are different because it's a newer generation. They gave us a newer generation of the server to get them out the door. This happens sometimes. We don't prefer it, guys, because it sucks for us setting it up. But maybe now I got to go make a check because the PCI slot is slightly different on that one, and I can just write that check in. And by the way, by smoothing it over like that, nobody ever knows that it's a problem. But I still document it. Why? Because it will be a problem one day in the future when we go to do upgrades. And then I need to remember for myself, hey, when I built these things, because past me needs to tell future me, because future me has no idea what the hell was going on. I don't know what was going on a year ago, right? Like I have to write it down for myself. So, I mean, I know how this stuff works, but I'm going to forget those type of things. And then here's the UUID, which is another way that we look at disks, right? All of these labels, the part UUID, the UUID, and the label, as well as just the raw dev, can be used in etcfs tab. So right here, we're using labels, because labels is the way that Ubuntu chose to do it. But if we go to a rel box, or in my case, like an old CentOS box, this is using UUID here for this one, for boot. And then all these other ones, I'm using the raw dev mapper right to the logical volume management disks. Antonio said, is my book good for beginners or is there a prerequisite? The only thing that you would want before if you were looking for this book, the Big Book of Labs, is to make sure that you can get it in Killer Coda, which is a free site. And then inside of Killer Coda, you're doing all of these labs that we're doing right here. So all of these different labs right here. And it's just more questions and reflection for you. That's how that book works, right? But no, there's no actual prerequisite. So, but what I would tell you before anybody considers buying that book, because I know the book's on the little revolver tabs here, is this is a completely 100% free book that we have right here. This is 100% free on getting into Linux as an administrator. And then this is a free security engineering one. Now, neither of these are necessarily for beginners, though. That's the one thing to know about these ones. I would call this book for beginners because it's just getting into the labs and doing the labs. But these two books are completely free, and they go over the courses that we run down in our Discord, which are also free. We're going to be on week 13 this Saturday for system hardening. And then I'm going to have to talk to you guys about the Ansible automation one, because this week I'm going to be, am I going to be down in Mexico this week? Hold on. I'll be down in Mexico that week, so I might not be, we might have to hold off on this one unless I can get somebody to come in and run it for me. and then we'll go into the last 2 weeks, engineering troubleshooting, and then our incident response. And people like incident response because I actually have broken servers that I've built, and then you guys just log in and like get broken ass servers, uh, which is funny to me because it's like, man, sometimes we got to deal with bullshit. Sometimes we got to deal with broken stuff. All right, guys, I need to take a break. I've been sitting here for 2 hours talking, so let me pull up my little hourglass here. Also, my wife's coming home with food, so I may have to get off of here in a second. Let's just go take a break. And walk around a bit. All right, 10 minutes. Walk around a little bit, take a break. I'm going to move this over here. But yeah, I tell you guys all the time, don't spend any money until you're ready to like go head first into Linux. Like even with me, hang out. And guys, some of you are going to look at this and go, God, I couldn't imagine doing this for another minute. It's a good thing to realize about yourself. You don't have to do Linux. But if we want to do Linux and get good at it, that's when I would maybe, join the community and hang out. That's also free too, right? That doesn't cost anything. So, all right, I'll be back. I'm going to take a walk. Hey, Enzo Bear, I'm just walking around right now, but you got to do all the Linux hoodie? Nice. Nice. I saw somebody ordered one of those. I'm surprised you ordered it. Oh, because you work in a data center. There you go. Yeah, because otherwise I would have said that was too hot for a little while, but I was hoping for an uptick in those around the colder months, but where you're at, it's going to be cold. All right. Still walking around for a minute, guys. Take a break. We'll get back to it in a second. All right. I'm done wandering around. Guys, I have been sitting. I bought this like one of those little bouncy balls that you can sit on, and then mine's like heavy duty, so I could like sit on it all day. And I'm a wrestler, so I have a pretty strong core. But even just sitting on it yesterday for like an hour, I could feel how much it was working me out. I have literally been sitting on it all day today. I sat on my my big chair, my normal desk chair, for about 15 minutes in the morning when I got back from wrestling, and I was like barely able to focus. And now I've literally sat on this thing all day, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna be sore, but I'll be all right. Yeah, we've got. So let me show you guys, if people want to join the Discord or want to hang out down there. Show you guys a little something here. We'll just stop the thing because I know I have to get off soon when the wife gets home. There's a little beginner start here section. This shows you pretty much everything that's going on in the Discord. Again, Discord doesn't cost anything. It's got some stuff to go start with. We've got a bunch of certs that are not related to us, but just out there in the world that we know that are free. So if you need to get something on your resume, these are things that are good engineering related things that'll get you on there. Then we've got our sysadmin course. These are all the videos. The Linux security engineering course. These are all the videos. These are free. And then we've got the books that were curated by the guys in the server. So there's actually a little writers group, writers room that you can join when they do their events. So we always have events going. Events are all free to hang out. There's a bash study group starting on Saturday. Repeats every Saturday. That's a pretty big one. The Linux sysadmin course we run every Saturday. That's my time. Discord will show you it in your time, guys. Right? So these are all free. People popped in there sometimes. They're like, "Am I allowed to be here?" And I'm like, "You be wherever you're allowed to go, right? Anywhere that the system doesn't stop you, you do whatever you want." We're thinking of running. I might rerun the security engineering course again, starting in September. We'll probably figure that out because people did like that one. And you might say, well, you know, what does that net me if I do any of those courses? Well, over here, we actually have a way on our website, which is maintained. Oh, I got to deploy a new website. I forgot about that. I need to tell Treasure. So I can go here, right, and I can look at me, and I can verify that I was part of the course, right? I was the Prolog admin course instructor, and there's a new version of the course that I need to deploy. So I need to go pull that. I actually could have probably done that on stream today, but we'll get to that. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning. Yeah, because I don't want to wait until the weekend, so maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning. But yeah, then there's just information about the group here. You know what we do, how you join us. It's all free. You just go hang out. The goal is, you know, to find people that are interested in doing this stuff, and then get you guys into doing it professionally, so that we've got a little network of people doing stuff. Yeah, anybody that's done this has a thing that shows that they went through the course, right? And that's a nice thing. One of our guys maintains this. This is Go, and then it's deployed via my Kubernetes infrastructure in the home lab. So Abdo said we would like to have some course integrating Ansible event driven with ServiceNow to any ticketing system. It would be a good exercise, maybe. Yeah, actually, so Abdo, in all of our courses, when I make you guys do these, well, I don't make anybody do anything, but for people that want to do our stuff, I always make you do like a big like project, and the project is really whatever you want to do with whatever the tooling is that we're working on. So like in the Linux sysadmin course, you had to deploy something and then prove it. In the security engineering course, you had to either build a system out and adhere to STIG compliance for HIPAA, or you had to just do some project that was some part of the things that we did in the course, right? That was kind of the way that we did it. So then when you're done, you have this big project that you could show somebody like, hey, I know how to do these things. And I always tell you guys, like when I do college, right, because I teach college as well, the things here, right, these topics and sessions, and actually it's best shown up here. These course objectives are the things you should be able to put on a resume. Like just saying that you went to like a Prolog group and studied Linux for 16 weeks, somebody's going to be like, the hell's that? I don't care. But if somebody was asking for somebody who could analyze system security and implement basic hardening of a system, you could absolutely put that on your resume and say you know how to do it. Because you will absolutely know how to do that if you've done this course. The same thing in this other course right here. This one, when you were done with this course, I'm not telling you you're going to be an expert that is infallible in the area of monitoring and alerting on events in Linux, But I'm 100% sure, I am 100% sure that you will know how to send stuff. Because if you did this course, and even last night people were sending them in here, you will be able to send information to Discord or to Slack or to Teams because you actually learned how to do it in the course. You were in one of those lab environments. Hold on, it's been a while since anybody's done it. And you sent actual Grafana alerts out of a closed system into the world. That's what these are right here. These are in our sandbox. You could send alerts in if you have our AP or our webhook, right? So you could show that to somebody. You can explain it. You understand the process. You understand what a trigger is, and you did SRE work, and you talked about like site reliability engineering as it relates to Google, and also in your own lab and in your own. So you did all these things. Here, these are the component pieces of this. So, all that to say, right? This is these courses are for you guys. I feel like I'm already in the industry. I already know this stuff. I want you guys to get along and know it as well. So, all right. Anyways, there's a bunch of stuff going on. Looks like Zorgel's down there studying or something. You guys can always, if you find somebody down there, you can always jump down in there and hang out with people. The bot welcomes people. It's not always nice about it. And then it looks like there's some volunteering stuff going on. There is some good volunteering things. I want to get the guy that runs Opportunity Hack to come talk, but he's always busy. So I want him to come talk to the group, because he's been running Opportunity Hack for a long time, and it's pretty good. So, all right. So here's what we're gonna do. I think the wife's gonna be home in a few minutes, so I'm gonna. Yeah, actually, so she said she's on her way home as of 7 minutes ago. So I got to get off of here. I'm going to go find somebody to raid over on the Twitch side. I appreciate you guys all coming by. Let's see who I'm following over here that we could go run into. I don't see anybody doing Linuxy stuff. Let's go look of somebody in the same category of similar size. I would like to drop in on somebody that's live and not just like a normal, ant cam or something like that. I don't see anybody I know over there. I'll look for somebody that's raided me before. Let's go raid over to Shy Hat. That's good. That's what we're going to raid. They've raided us before. Our raid message for people on Twitch is always our do all the Linux. So we're going to raid over there. I appreciate you guys coming by, and I will see some of you guys here later on this week. Take care.